And I didn't know anything about HTML. And the place where you built websites back then, if you didn't know anything about HTML, was a place called GeoCities, which was one of the top web properties on the web. And if you're not familiar with GeoCities, then you just have to think about MySpace and then think of something that's actually quite a bit uglier. And it looked a lot like this. So this is sort of an homage to GeoCities. And what you'd see is these horrible backgrounds and flashing text and broken images and all the stuff that we kind of associate with awful, awful Web 1.0. And what you'll see at the very, very bottom of the screen, I'll blow it up, is the key thing that every GeoCities page needed, which is that page view counter. And why do I bring this up? The page view counter was the only way that you could understand how much traffic your web page was getting, right? Google Analytics just didn't exist back then. And so you'd just grab that code, you'd drop it on your page, and you'd watch that traffic ring up. So page view counters, what does that have to do with anything? Well, what I'm trying to liken it to is actually the current state of inbound call tracking and analytics. Most companies, most marketers that are employing some version of call tracking aren't doing much more than leveraging the technology and the level of granularity of detail that you get from the page view counter 20 years ago. And so what I want to talk about in this presentation is how we can get to a state where marketers who care about calls move beyond counting calls, counting page views, and actually start attributing real conversions, because that's the place that we have to get as an industry. So why do consumers call in? I mean, a lot of you guys sit in the considered purchases verticals where they know that consumers call in because they want to speak to a human. They want that one-to-one human interaction. And that often happens when the purchase is expensive or complicated or personal or otherwise stressful. They feel like they've done the research online, but they really need to speak to somebody to put them at ease. And so as we talk about that, they're considered purchases. And let's go through a few examples here. So we have a company like 3 Day Blinds. 70% of their customers are actually calling in to book an appointment. That's their form of a conversion, because they're inviting somebody into their home to design custom window treatments just for them. Then you have a company like Dish that's driving 92% of the revenue through the phone channel, as well as T-Mobile that's driving 10,000 telesales calls per day. So this is a critical channel for a lot of these marketers. But the problem is that most marketers have almost no visibility into what happens when somebody stops researching online and picks up the phone and calls, even if the phone call is in the critical path of conversion. So if you're an e-commerce company, it's equivalent to a marketer not being able to even understand what's going on in the checkout or the payment process. Zero visibility into what's going on there. You feed them into a black hole and you have no idea. And so these marketers can't understand things like who's calling in, what's happening on these calls, right? Is it a good call? Is it a sales call that I want to drive? Is it a service call? Why am I spending my paid search dollars driving service calls? The type of data that we expect from our digital channels, we just can't get that at all when somebody calls in. And for many reasons, this is actually quite expected. If we think about what channels marketing owns, if we think about mobile, email, search, the website, social, these are the channels that digital marketers are familiar with. We understand these places. We feel comfortable with this type of data. But phone calls, that's in the contact center. I don't even know what's going on over there. I don't even talk to those people, right? They control that data. How am I supposed to do anything with it when I don't even know the name of somebody over there? And so what we find with most marketers is that there's a huge divide between the data that they own and they feel comfortable with, and this kind of foreign contact center data that they're realizing that they need to understand better. And so that's the point of call tracking analytics. That's the point, why do these platforms exist, is to bridge that chasm and connect that offline call experience back to the digital experience. So you can treat the data that's being generated, that's being captured from the contact center in the same way that you would treat your digital data. So you can capture the customer ID, you can understand who they are, what campaigns drove them, in what interest, what's their product interest, what did they talk about, what was the conversion, all that type of stuff, so you can better orchestrate the customer journey, understand revenue, at the most basic level, get credit for what you guys are already doing as search marketers. So what is the use case the primary use case is about optimizing using this closed loop attribution. And so we have a consumer who picks up their phone, does a web search, ends up calling in from either a call extension or by landing on a page doing some research and calling on a click to call button, let's say. And then we want to measure, was that a good call or a bad call? Is this calls we want to drive or calls we don't want to drive? And we push that information into the search activation platforms, and then you create that closed loop attribution with real-time conversion measurement, where you do things like adjust keyword bids, suppress ads, input for smart bidding models, input for lookalike audiences, all the types of ways that you guys would traditionally use any old type of conversion data. But now it's just coming from this offline channel. So that sounds very simple, right? But I want to bring back GeoCities. I want to bring back the page counter, right? The page view counter, because that's not what most marketers are doing. We have very, very sophisticated customers that are down that path, but most customers, most marketers are still on a level of using call counting. They get baseline reporting on how many people are calling in, and perhaps even if it's a sales or a service call, but they're not really getting the level of granularity of detail on that data that's really going to propel their marketing forward. And if you think about it let's just go back to a pure digital experience. Would you be happy optimizing your search marketing just to a site lander? Or do you want to track that consumer all the way to the point of conversion and optimize to that? And so when we think about call counting, what are we missing out on? We're missing out on that caller data. We're missing out on real-time conversion, or if you have a longer sales cycle, funnel stage measurement reporting, granular closed loop attribution down to the keyword level. And then we talked some about this morning with the linguistics data that Kia was using, is actually understanding what's going on these phone calls. What are the topics being discussed? What are the trends in those topics? And understanding that to not only influence maybe paid search optimization, but using that throughout the rest of your marketing to influence content and all that type of thing. So if you're just doing call counting, you're just missing out on this type of data. So let me run through a quick example on the attribution side. So this should be pretty easy to understand. If you're just doing call counting, you're seeing every single call that comes through the system, and you're evaluating 3 keywords: cheap insurance, best insurance, and insurance coverage. Cheap insurance is the clear winner, right? But smart marketers understand that not every call coming in, actually 70% of them tend to be service calls. So do I really want to be optimizing to that? So you might start thinking about, well, I know that any sales call has to last 5 minutes. So you could start thinking about, okay, let's evaluate long calls. Let's evaluate only calls that last a certain duration. And this changes the picture a little bit, right? Maybe your last 2 keywords switch places. But we all know that's not good enough. Let's get all the way to the point of conversion, and you finally get a completely different picture. And this is the type of thing that we actually see with most of our clients, is that the keywords that they think are their top performers are not at all driving the types of consumer interactions that they're looking to optimize toward. And so how do you create that closed loop attribution? So we like to think that there's 2 ways. Funny, okay. There's 2 ways to do that, through the use of integrations and artificial intelligence and machine learning. So I'll go through both of those real quickly. So how do we connect where I spend money on my search platforms and my media platforms to the places where the money is actually captured, right? Where am I recording that in your sales and contact center platforms? So what any good call tracking platform should do is have these bidirectional integrations. so that if a consumer does a search for insurance coverage, that information is now passed from the search platform into call tracking and then passed along into the sales or contact center. Places like Salesforce or SAP, or on the contact center side, places like Genesys and Five9. Now, when that conversion, say that phone call happens, that consumer purchases a policy, that information is then passed back through the call tracking platform and back into your search platform. So it's pretty simple, creating that closed loop attribution. And that works particularly well, especially in a B2B case. And a lot of customers have already set this up. But there are some problems when you're doing that sort of call conversion measurement manually. Number one, it can be extremely costly to analyze. If you're not capturing it at the moment that that call ends at a high fidelity of detail, then what you have to do is actually pay people to listen to calls and write down what they're hearing. Did a conversion happen? Was it a new customer? Was it a returning customer? Et cetera, et cetera. And the price on that can rack up pretty quickly. Also, you end up with a lot of data inconsistencies when you have, say, 100 reps, each with his or her own process for dispositioning a call. Dispositioning is when you write down what happened. And then finally, let's say those two things aren't a problem. What we often find is that the data does get back to marketing, but 30, 60 days later, where it's too late to really, drive that type of optimization that you're really looking for. And so that's where AI and machine learning come in. Machine learning powered predictive models can actually run on your live calls and predict the outcome of those calls in real time. So that rather than having people listen in on calls, kind of a low value activity, you have algorithms doing it on your behalf. And it can do it in real time. You don't have to wait 30 or 60 days. And when properly trained, it does require some work. But when these models are properly trained, you can hit accuracy rates of 95% or better, which is really, really good for closed loop attribution in terms of giving you a strong signal of what you should optimize toward. So how do you do that? It's a basic three-step process. The first step is to identify what is the outcome you're looking to detect. And this can vary greatly by industry or by advertiser. So am I looking to track a purchase made or an appointment set or an application completed? These are the types of outcomes that you want to understand. So you've got all these call recordings happening in the contact center. You simply identify those calls, those recorded calls, where that outcome was achieved, and that's where the AI goes to work. The AI uses that information to train custom predictive models that are trained specifically to find that specific outcome. And once you've got that model in place, you simply apply it to all of your inbound calls. And these aren't mutually exclusive outcomes. You can understand prospect versus existing customer. At the same time, you can understand, did they ask for a quote? Did they complete an application? Did they purchase a policy? All in the same time. And that's basically how it works. So you get that real-time conversion data. I like to think of it from the digital side as just sort of pixel level data that you would get now from these conversational data. And then you simply push it back into the platform. So if we take Google Ads, you push that conversion data using the offline conversion API, and it sits in there just like you would expect any other conversion data. And you can do with it what you would do with any type of conversion data in there. So I'll run through a couple examples here. I love this example. It's a customer who has actually had that closed loop attribution in place with the contact center back into their marketing stack. But their real challenge is what they were getting all that data 45 days late. And so they're actually missing that attribution. They had misallocated paid search budgets because that data was basically stale by the time they got it back in. So they wanted to use AI to speed up that process. And so understand what are the good calls, what do I want to drive more of, what do I want to avoid, push that information in, attribution, suppression, adjusting your bids, et cetera. And so the results on this, just by speeding up that closed loop attribution, was actually an 18% reduction in cost per quote. And this was for an insurance agent. And what they did is they adjusted their target keywords to things that were actually driving quotes and all the types of things that you would expect to do with that type of data. 18% was a tremendous, tremendous outcome for them. And then my last example here is an employment service. This is a company that we work with, and they had a really interesting use case because they have a lot of callers that call in, and they have two main types. You've got hiring managers, which are the good calls. They're their customers. They pay them. And then you have job candidates. And so they had the problem of, I'm spending a lot on search, and I'm driving a lot of calls, but I can't distinguish between the job candidates that I don't want to optimize towards and the hiring managers. And how can I figure that out? Because there's not an easy way. There's no conversion metric. I just want to have those conversations. And so what we did is we built a custom predictive model for these guys. And then we dove into the model and actually looked at the ingredients of that model. And these are spoken words. I mean, if you think about conversations, there's spoken words that actually predict what's the outcome of that conversation. And what we found was the two biggest predictors of what the outcome, the type of caller was pronouns, was you and we. And what they realized in listening to calls afterwards is that when job candidates called in, the word you was used frequently. You imagine an agent, how many years of experience do you have? When are you looking to leave your current job? So it's a lot of kind of, interaction where it's sitting on the other side of a table from each other. Whereas when a hiring manager called in, more collaborative relationship, sitting on the same side of the table, it was a lot of we, What should we be looking for on your behalf and that type of thing? So this is types of sort of, not illogical, but something that you wouldn't think of, non-obvious insight that AI can find on your behalf and then put into place automatically to just drive the result that you're looking for, which is just help me understand who's a good caller and who's a bad caller, and help me optimize to that. So anyway, that's my time here. Oh no, actually, 40%. So that's important. That's important to cover. Just by doing that, obviously they reduced cost per client call from search by 40%. So again, company name is Invoca. We're going to be here for the next few days. I'm Ian Dailey, and I'm here with my colleagues Deanna and Megan. We have a table out there, and we'd love to talk to you if this at all sounds like something that you're struggling with. All right, thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Ian. Also, a few of you folks might be